Hello and welcome back to Premier Injuries here for your Monday data show, where we analyse an interesting foible that we found in Premier injury data. And just before we get into the analysis, remember to like, share and subscribe to the Premier Injuries YouTube channel, because we're growing, and as we grow, so does our content as well. We're doing daily Monday to Friday, and we even slipped in one on Saturday last weekend. But this discussion this week, we've actually got two for you. So a double trouble here. I think real value for money, because we're talking to the injury expert himself, Mr. Ben Dinnery of Premier Injuries. And we're talking through the combined league days missed through injury this season. It's quite interesting data. We're going to put the graph up onto the channel here. And can you explain why this data is so important, Ben, but also some of the interesting insights that you've taken from this?
First and foremost, what we're doing is you look at the number of Premier League games missed by players within the squads and break that down. And player availability is key. If you look at the Premier League in its entirety over time, those top six teams, the teams which have the greatest availability of their best players, inherently go on to win the league. And that sounds obvious, of course. But across all of that time, there's only been two anomalies in that. I think Manchester United was one of those back in 2009-10 when they had that great attack, which included, I think, was Berbatov and Solskjaer. But it's availability that is the key. And we talk about, Liverpool. Let's look at Liverpool, because things aren't going too well on Merseyside at this moment in time. There's a lot of discussion around the players that they've had missing, or players are just returning, and one of those is at centre back. And Virgil van Dijk is a player who's obviously at the forefront of people's minds in terms of his absence from that Liverpool squad. But it's the knock-on effect of the rest of the team, of how it can have an impact. So in the absence of Van Dijk, you'd be looking at Joe Gomez and Joel Matip. You take Joe Gomez out of the team, who do you look at then? Well, do you put Nat Phillips in there on occasions? But then you maybe take Jordan Henderson out. You put Jordan Henderson back in alongside Matip. Matip gets injured. You're then putting Fabinho in there. So you're taking key players out of that Liverpool midfield and dropping them into that Liverpool backline. Then you'd lose the people who are deputising for those centre-backs, then become injured. So not only have you lost your midfielder, but now you've also lost your replacement centre-back in Jordan Henderson. And we've just got Fabinho coming back into the squad. So, they mightn't have suffered the most injuries or lost the most days to injury per year, but there's a concentration of injuries all in and around that centre-back area, which has had the biggest impact on their season to date.
Looking at another team that have been really seriously hit by injuries from this kind of data, and we look at Sheffield United, do you think that the problems that they've had with their downfall this season, because frankly they had a fantastic first season in the Premier League and a lot of people thought that they would kick on, do you think that that is the main problem that the Blades have had so far this season?
I don't think it's easy as just to say, to pinpoint one specific area that's caused the main issue. It's likely to be a number of influencing factors. Sheffield United last season, yes, they had a great year, but it was all still fine margins. There were tight games or edging, 2-1, 1-0, kept it very tight at the back. We've also seen at Sheffield United that backline has been decimated. Jack O'Connell, huge miss. We've got John Egan out. We've had Phil Jagielka suspended at the weekend. Chris Basham also injured. So there's been players in and out of that backline, Ender Stevens. And the games that they were maybe edging, 1-0, 2-1 last season, they're losing those games now. And then once you factor in, the loss of confidence, that loss of belief, you go a goal behind it, they're not blessed with the greatest firepower. And you kind of expect, a Sheffield United side to be going out and scoring 2 and 3 goals every week. That just isn't how, the Blades are set up, and they just don't have the personnel to be able to do that. So really the foundation of their last year's season was on that defensive backline and keeping things tight. They also lost Dean Henderson as well. They replaced him with Ramsdale. So again, there's a lot of factors, but yeah, certainly injuries are a big part of that.
I think looking at this table, one last question focusing on this data set before we move on to the next topic of discussion. Do you think some of this contextualises how brilliant Leeds have done so far this season? Because they sit there as having the third most days lost in terms of this kind of data set. Does that just show you how brilliant Bielsa has been in managing that team through big injuries? I think, one of the big ones is obviously Calvin Phillips being lost in the midfield there. Does that just show you the unique brilliance of Bielsa?
Look, I think by his own admission, Bielsa said, with the exception of one, possibly two players within that Leeds United squad, I think Liam Cooper is one of them. It's centre-back, and maybe Patrick Bamford up top. Everybody else within that squad is more than capable of playing at least two, even three positions. So therefore, when you're picking up these injuries, centre-back, defence, left-back, right-back, we've seen how he's able to shuffle that team to, I think he's went with a 3-3-4. He's went with, 4-2-3-1, 4-5-1s, 4-1-4-1. So he has that flexibility and that fluidity because, players are able to adapt and slot into different places to cover. And obviously, that's been a huge bonus to well. And yes, given his philosophy, given how hard his team works and how hard they push the opposition, like I say, they've done very well in their first season up, and it's great to see the performances that they're producing. Very pleasing on the eye, and they're quickly becoming everybody's second favourite team. I think pretty much like Newcastle were back in the Keegan days.
Well, hopefully Newcastle can get back to those days. Maybe they should get Bielsa instead of Bruce. That might improve things there. But let's move it on to, and I think this is quite important because, we at Premier Injuries like to be at the forefront of injury analysis, keeping up with the latest information. And today there was an excellent insight into ACL injuries data. Ben, could you explain what these new findings show?
Yeah, so this was a Journal of Sports Medicine, and that was showing just the number of ACL injuries across a 10-year period in Italian professional football. And maybe to the uninitiated or from the outside looking in, you tend to think these types of injuries are fatigue related. Those that maybe happen late in the game when players are maybe not making the right position. They're maybe putting their bodies in positions they shouldn't be in. They're just getting caught, so on and so forth. But what this actually shows, a study, is that the majority of injuries, ACL ruptures within Italian football, occur within the opening 45 minutes of competitive games. And that suggests that it's not fatigue that is a factor. It's almost that, the bodies aren't prepared adequately enough to go out and tolerate the rigors of that game, and they're not mentally focused in terms of their neurological system to kick off in that game, and that's why these injuries are taking place.
So what does this mean then for teams and players in terms of prevention of injuries? Is this going to now be applied in a sense for those all-important warm-ups at the start of matches?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's key. The difficulty is as well, and it's often said you see teams going out to warm up, and they'll go through their process, they'll do their bit of a session, and then it's back to the changing rooms, and they're sitting down and they're cooling down. Teams are slowly trying to move away from that, and they're trying to keep the tempo, keep the heart rate elevated. But we know, just even from a psychological standpoint of getting yourself in the mindset and getting yourself ready to go out on that pitch. But of course, it's not just as simple. Injuries are never just black and white. There are lots of grey areas around that, and you need to scratch beneath the surface with the data to understand why these are occurring. And I touched upon Virgil van Dijk before. can you legislate for a tackle by Jordan Pickford, regardless of how you're prepared, how much you train, at what minute of the game that happens? If somebody comes out and challenges you in the way that does, then there's a good chance that you are going to suffer some kind of serious damage to your knee. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And that's just, football is a contact sport, and you cannot get away from that. And it's just, you need to accept it. If you don't want to get injured, don't play the game.
So just focusing on the ACL though, how do you warm up to prevent it from being injured? And does this kind of data suggest that there needs to be a change? Like you said, their players come in, they almost cool down a little bit after doing the warm up. Does there need to be a change in match day setup?
I mean, look, first and foremost, what you need, now the game is run at such an elite level, with backroom staff, with coaches, with sports science team. Every single measurable piece of data it's taken to the nth degree. So we're talking about individual training programs and something. So there is no hiding place really now. GPS tracking, distance covered, high intensity sprints. And look, we're moving away from that. But like I say, it's not just a case of blanketing every injury. You need to look at some of the other influencing factors as to why these types of injuries occur. And even like you say, with the best will and with the best intention and the best preparation possible, sometimes these injuries are just unavoidable.
So that was a great insight into some new groundbreaking data, and hopefully we do see a reduction in ACL injuries like the one that has affected Virgil van Dijk, because they are so bad for people's careers. They take you out of the game for a while. And I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of the data show on Mondays. So once again, remember to subscribe, because we're here every Monday dissecting all important Premier League information for you about our well-beating Premier injuries data. But for now, have a good rest of your week and make sure to tune in for tomorrow's show.